understand about God is that He is omnipresent, meaning He is everywhere at the same time. He fills all spaces. Solomon said that the heaven, even the heaven of heavens, cannot contain Him. He fills heaven and earth. He says that He's a God at hand and not a God afar off. That in Him we live and move and have our being. We exist in Him. He's our dwelling place. David said, "If I ascend up into heaven, Thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, Thou art there." And so we see God everywhere. Everywhere you go, God is. And omnipresence is it really only makes sense within the creation, because before there was creation, there's just God, but there was no where, there was no place, and so there was just God. So when we think of God's omnipresence, you can't mingle ideas of creation with ideas of God, because then you start thinking stuff like that God is more in one spot or more in one location than another location. Even the Bible says, "Our Father which art in heaven," He He manifests Himself within time and space in heaven. Like He appears in heaven in the dimensionality of creation. That's God within time, but and God within creation. But God, in His eternal state, there is no space, there is no location, there is no place. There's just God. So omnipresence is a term that only is understood by us within the creation. So you don't want to import those ideas of God into His eternal state, and you don't want to come up with fallacies of thought where you're imagining, God is there's more of God here than there, or if God fills more of one spot than another spot. There's no thought that applies to God in that way as far as quantity. God is not measurable, because that involves space, that involves time. But when God manifests Himself, He's everywhere, but He fills heaven and earth. But it's really that it's not that He fills it in the sense that He comes into it and fills it up, but it's that it exists in Him, and so He's everywhere. That anywhere that there is time and space, God is there, because it exists in Him. And so He's the creator and the sustainer of it, and in that sense too, He manifests Himself by His Spirit. Now we think of the incarnation as that God became flesh. He became a man, but also after Jesus died for our sins, rose again from the dead, ascended bodily up into heaven, that He sent His Spirit. And the sending of His Spirit involves time and space, location, and the manifestation of His Spirit is the idea that God is entering into our dimensionality with His presence. When you think of water vapor, it's everywhere, but when it's condensed and pressurized, it's visible. So we need to think of God and understand Him as omnipresent, but not in the sense of filling time and space, but that time and space exists within Him. He's not subject to it, it's subject to Him. All right?